to read these stats off real quick. So this is from Gabe Eichert, who's a former Oklahoma offensive lineman who now does Sirius XM and stuff like that. I think he's got a podcast as well talking Oklahoma football, but I'm sure you've seen him around if you watch enough college football stuff. But he had a stat from a little while ago that he titled one tweet about it saying, "I've stared at this for 5 straight minutes. It's startling." And I'm, there's a lot of hyperbole on Twitter about this is the greatest thing ever, or whatever. So I'm like, okay, let me see what he's staring at his computer over. And then I stared at my computer for 5 straight minutes. Here is what he had to say, or here's what he posted. The rushing defense stats in the Big 12 currently. You have a bunch of teams who have played 6 games and a few like Baylor, West Virginia, Oak State, and TCU who have played 5. But through those 5 and 6 games, right now, over the entire season, Iowa State average yards per game has the best rushing defense in the Big 12. Does that surprise you in any way?
No, not really.
91 yards a game on the ground is what Iowa State's defense is giving up. Who would you think is number 2 if you just had to venture a guess?
In the Big 12?
Yes.
Baylor.
Yeah, Baylor gives up 96.8 yards rushing per game through 5 games. Those are the only 2 that are under 100 yards. West Virginia gives up a shade over 100 yards, 100.6. You got Oak State, Kansas, Texas, K-State, TCU, Texas Tech. And that leaves one, and Texas Tech, to give you kind of the range here. Iowa State and Baylor, sub 100. West Virginia 100 all the way to Tech, who's 146. They gave up 146 yards per game on the ground. Team number 10, the Oklahoma Sooners. I don't think it comes as a surprise that they give up the most rushing yards per game. But you go from Tech at number 9 giving up 146.5 to Oklahoma giving up 214.5 yards per game through their entire schedule on the ground. They're giving up over 200 yards rushing per game. Now, that includes some of those gimmies that they had early on. You subtract the non-conference games, and you get into just strictly Big 12 contests. And some teams have played 3 games, some teams have played 2. Oklahoma's a team that's played 3. But the best rushing defense so far in the Big 12, you want to venture a guess? Just Big 12 play only.
Iowa State?
Kansas, actually. Okay. 105.33 yards per game. Kansas is averaging on rushing defense. Baylor, number 2, giving up 116 in Big 12 play per game. Texas, 121. Iowa State, 122. Oak State, K-State, West Virginia, TCU. Then you get into where the numbers kind of climb. Like Kansas is 105, and you very quickly get to West Virginia, who's given up over 150 per. TCU giving up 184 rushing yards per game in Big 12 play. I think that's notable. Texas Tech giving up 210 yards per game rushing yardage through 3 Big 12 games so far, okay? Mm-hmm. So that's not great. You don't give up 200 average. But the same team at number 10, looking at the whole season, is the same team at number 10 looking at just their 3 Big 12 contests, which, of course, is the Oklahoma Sooners. 310 yards rushing per game is what they're averaging, giving up so far through 3 Big 12 games. 310 yards rushing through 3 Big 12 games on average. Well, that is not surprising, I understand, but that's still like, holy cow.
You know what that's like? What they used to do to everybody else in the Big 8 back in the day with the bone.
I think if I'm Kansas this week and have to roll out Jason Bean to start, even though he played really well, that takes a lot of pressure off him having to throw the ball. If you can just run the ball right at him for a little while and do that.
Man. Yeah. So, like, you have KU, Baylor, Texas, Iowa State, Oak State, K-State, right? All of them give up sub 150 per average in the Big 12. You got West Virginia and TCU between the 150 and the 200 mark. And then Tech, obviously, a little over 200. But then from 9 to 10, from Tech's 210, they're giving up an additional 100 yards per game. Like, that's crazy. So, I mean, start there. There's a lot of other problems, but that was, that was quite the stat. And it's not surprising, like I said, but it's still startling.
Garrett, that blows me away because they used to average 300 yards on the ground back in the day, and really for a long, even now, they've done that against some teams. Garrett, not the first tweet, the second one with the UT quarterback stat that this is from Max Olson. Texas is averaging 4.37 points per drive. when Quinn Ewers is on the field. Ohio State is currently the #1 scoring team in the country at 4.13 points per drive. So that's the kind of lift. And I don't know what the stat was of Hudson Card. They still were very effective. But that is something that there's one of those stats. I love stats. I love historical stuff. But just wanted to throw that in with you as well.
I do think that Oklahoma's kind of skewed these stats in the Big 12 for everybody who's played them, as far as their offensive stats go. So I'll be very curious to see how that evens out, because I think Quinn Ewers is still going to be pretty amazing no matter who he's playing. But, and I also think that they're going to roll over the Cyclones this weekend, but they are going to start facing some of the better defenses. So that will be a fun little, starting with Iowa State. Like Iowa State, I don't know if they can keep up, but I know they can play good defense. And so that'll be a fun little team to see him play against. And, ultimately Oak State and Baylor and the rest of them. But yeah, he's been very good in a very short amount of time.
It sure helps when you have somebody, when you're multidimensional on offense, where you can run it, you can throw it. They can do both. Some can, some can't. And sometimes you don't have to, but it sure does help to have the weapons around you. When we come back, John McClain.